My name is Professor James Small. Can you hear me now? Well, the first thing you've got to do, you've got to marry that definition of Black mythology with Black historical retention and reality. It takes one generation to deny the history of a people and get it lost, at least a large portion of it to be lost. And so we have to recreate ourselves constantly, every generation, with the fragments that we have and with the dreams that we are dreaming. And that's what ends up forming your mythology.
How do we synthesize that African retention with the contemporary popular culture in the media that is informing us of who we are?
We're able to synthesize ourselves with our retention, with the mythology that has grown in our histology in the Western Hemisphere, especially with what we see in popular media today. We define popular media more than we think. Our music, our dance, the thing we don't really have the control over that we want to have more control over is the theater and the movies, because that is so impacting when portraying an image, a way of being, a way of knowing of a group of people. I think we have done more synthesizing than most people know. There isn't a music in the Western Hemisphere that isn't influenced by African musical retention, whether it be Canada, North America, Puerto Rico, Brazil, Jamaica, or Grenada. All of it is influenced by the retentions that our ancestors brought with them. And then we synthesized it with the European cultural institution that we were forced to be a part of. You can sing your music, but don't call it African. We'll call it gospel, right? We'll call it jazz. We'll call it reggae. Just don't call it African. And then it's acceptable. And even though we've synthesized a lot of European musical technology in with our African musical retention, it is still fundamentally African. We always have to remember the relationship that the myth is trying to cover up. The real relationship, the relationship of racism, the relationship of the false notion of white supremacy, the relationship of the superiority of white culture. Those things are still dominant, though it's not said. But the African community, the Black community, we got to constantly be aware of them. Whites don't have to think about them because they've made an assumption that that is the way it is supposed to be. The African realized, no, this is not the way it's supposed to be. So how do I explain this to myself?
I don't think we're comfortable with our presence.
I don't think we're comfortable with our presence either, because we know there's a force that's saying you're not acceptable. And so we have to constantly fight to be acceptable. But we understand we don't want to give up ourselves to be acceptable. And the mythology is trying to explain that relationship so that you can be acceptable to the social order that is denying you access and still be acceptable to yourself without abandoning your being. Well, you've heard me say many times, history erases the mystery, right? When we talk about history, we speak about the African in the Western Hemisphere, though he's an immigrant from Africa. We did not immigrate from Africa. We came from Africa as prisoners of war, and we lived over 500 years in a process of genocide, the worst genocide in the history of the world, the longest genocidal event against a single people in the history of the world. And so the people are responding from that genocide, but we rarely take that into account when we try to understand their behavior. And at first you see you, but what you don't really see is you looking at you. How real is the you in the mirror. Is it just the reflection that you're seeing in the mirror? Or there's really a you there looking at you? If you think of yourself just as physical, then it's just a reflection. But if you see yourself beyond the physical, which is what most of us are, there's something else going on there. When you look at yourself in that mirror, are you afraid of yourself?
No, not anymore. And partially because I think I've come to an appreciation for how much I've actually been there for myself. And from a very young age, I've had to be there for myself. And so I'm able to keep myself safe.
If you had to tell yourself who you want to be tomorrow, not tomorrow the day necessarily, but just tomorrow in time, what would you tell yourself?
I know you said that you want to get out of your own way. Mm-hmm. So what part of yourself are you abandoning that doesn't allow you to get out of your own way?
I think I'm getting this social. I'm very much a person that sticks to myself. I guess part of it is why I trust myself or I feel safe with myself is because I've taken care of me. But in order to get beyond this, to get the message I hope to share with everyone across, it does require me to be able to socialize. And that's where I think there's a block. I don't feel safe to reach out to others.
We're not strangers. We're the same being. We're just different aspects of it, So how do we learn how to bring that body back together again? Well, you have to sit down together and you have to discuss the injuries, and then you learn how to come up with the healing. Because you can't heal something if you don't know it's there. And most of us don't even know we're injured because we won't sit down and have a conversation about it with anyone. So we turn to alcohol, we turn to drugs, or we turn to sex. And sex can be as addictive as alcohol or drugs as a way of avoiding looking in the mirror and disrobing and seeing what's really there, not just physiologically, but psychologically, spiritually, culturally. And when you begin to look in the mirror with all of those aspects and ask the question, are you who you should be? And how do I become who I ought to be? And so we got to get back to what are the tools that we can use to bring us together so we can expose ourselves without feeling vulnerable, right? It's hard to do that because people hurt you and people don't want to be hurt. And so they don't want to open up. But practice makes perfect. If you keep practicing coming together and opening up, then you figure out how to best begin to heal one another once you open up your wounds to one another. Because we're afraid, especially brothers, we don't want nobody to see we got wounds, And we don't just have it from our relationship with our male, we have it from our relationship with the corporate world, we have it from our relationship with the school system, we have it from our relationship with the European cultural leaders in general. And so we cover up these wounds and pretend we don't even have them. And we walk around full of scars with no healing going on. And the only person that can really heal you is to heal yourself. But you can't heal yourself without a relationship with your other self, which is your brothers and your sisters. Right, one of you courageous young men, because brothers, let me tell the sisters something about brothers. We are really cowards, I'm just going to tell the truth. I'm a coward. I finally realized way in my life when I thought I was the baddest, toughest dude in the world, then I was the biggest coward in the room, And then we have to learn how not to be afraid, men. We are so afraid. We have the facade of being so brave, but it's because we're afraid. That's why we get angry so quickly. That's why we strike out so quickly, because we're afraid. Don't be afraid. Just look at that person in there and have a relationship with that person for a few minutes before we start talking to you. Connect with that person. You've been living with that person how many years now?
34 going on 35.
Nearly 35 years. And we rarely really stop and ask, who the hell am I?
I'm a provider. Not yet a husband, but who knows? I'm a brother. I'm a son. I'm a conveyor of history. But I'm someone that just wants to be part of the solution. I want to be part of our global solution.
Still not telling me who's sitting there. You're generalizing who's sitting there. I want you to really focus in. Focus in on the person that's really looking into the eyes of the person that's looking into the eyes of the person.
Can you give me an example of what I could say?
No. I want to see what you see. Just focus on your eyes. Now, close your eyes for a moment. And you don't have to blindfold it, but just close both eyes. And describe yourself to yourself. Describe your personality, your immediacy. Describe that person to us.
Sometimes I'm kind of afraid of my strength. I'm afraid to be vulnerable. I like to laugh. I like to have a good time. But I'm also afraid of what or who I can become. I know that I have some sort of mission, but at times it feels like I don't allow myself to go in depth.
Do you trust you with you?
I trust me with me. But sometimes I'm also scared to trust myself. And not because I cannot accomplish what I want to do, but because I have doubts. And in time, instead of focusing on what I need to do, I focus on the doubting part. And that takes away from who I am, who I want to be, who I project myself to be.
Who is this extraordinary people that came from every tribe in Africa and amalgamated into one in North America and the Caribbean and Central South America? We're the one Africa. We're the cosmic gene pool reunited. Okay? I'm no longer Shona, Ndebele, Zulu. I'm no longer Yoruba or Akan. I'm all of them. I am all of them. You are all of them. Tell their story. Tell the story from their perspective. But how do we solve the contradiction? Because you're not writing this and say, oh, I wrote a story, I got an award, yada, yada. No. Hopefully, your story helped to solve the economic, the political, the cultural, and the spiritual contradictions that don't allow us to recreate ourselves, right? As we should in every generation. But you want to always recreate the best of yourself. But you first have to discover what the best of yourself is. That's when history comes and erases the mystery, and you can see yourself again in the mirror. To be free, truly free, is to be shackled to your identity. And that's why history, by erasing the mystery, gives you access back to that identity, which allows you to begin the process of self-freedom.